My name is Valerie Tran. I'm 36. Founder of Linkwell Technologies, a logistics optimization company used by Fortune 500 firms from coast to coast. But none of that mattered to my family. To them, I've always just been the quiet one, the one who moved to Seattle, the one who got lucky with computers. 3 weeks ago, I signed a $24 million deal with Vantage Systems, a massive win for my team. Their VP of engineering is Kyle Weston. Coincidentally, he's also my brother Evan's best man. I expected a congratulations. A text, maybe. Instead, I got a wedding invitation in a cream envelope with no note. Not even sent to my home. It arrived at my office, addressed to Valerie Tran and guest. It could have been a spam mailer. Nathan was the first to see my face when I opened it. He didn't ask what was wrong. He never does because he always knows. "You don't have to go," he said. I looked down at the card, then at him. "I know, but I think I will." He held my gaze for a moment. "Then we go on your terms." That's Nathan, an architect who builds silence into safety. He's the only person I know who can say 3 words and make the ground feel steady. The next morning, we packed light. I chose the navy silk dress I wore to our last investor meeting, clean lines, calm strength. Nathan folded his shirt around his grandfather's cufflinks, brass and scratched, but steady like him. On the drive to San Jose, we passed cliffside turns and fog-lined hills. I answered 2 investor calls, declined 1 podcast interview. But mostly, I stared out the window, not thinking, just tracing the silence between who I've become and who my family still thinks I am. "You ready?" Nathan asked as we neared the estate. I took a breath. "As I'll ever be." He reached over and laced our fingers. "I don't care if they see you. I see you." I didn't say thank you. I just held his hand a little tighter. Because this time, I wasn't walking in to prove I belonged. I was walking in to stop performing. The Blake estate was the kind of place you rented when you wanted people to talk about the wedding more than the marriage. White stone fountains, imported roses, staff in tailored vests. Even the gravel driveway crunched like luxury. Nathan helped me out of the car, his hand warm on my back. He looked around, then whispered, "Feels more like a product launch than a wedding." I smiled faintly. Fitting, considering who's getting married. As we approached the check-in desk, the event coordinator glanced at her tablet. Name: Valerie Tran, +1. Her eyes scanned the list. Pause, a flicker of confusion, then a smile too wide. "Ah, yes, table 11B. She didn't explain the B. A staff member appeared to escort us. Past the main garden, past the crystal-lit tent with monogrammed menus, past rows of champagne flutes and pastel gowns, then through a narrow walkway, to a corner behind the speakers, next to a potted ficus and a power strip, table 11B 2 metal chairs, a tablecloth barely covering a folding table. The view: half of a photo booth backdrop, the other half blocked by a catering cart. I said nothing. But Nathan turned to the staffer and asked, "Is this a guest table?" The guy blinked. "It's what the bride requested, sir." I could feel the heat rise behind Nathan's calm tone. "She requested we sit behind a wall of extension cords." The staffer swallowed. It was a last-minute change. We sat, not because we accepted it, but because sometimes you sit in the insult long enough to remember how it feels. My mother walked by 20 minutes later. She didn't flinch at the sight of our table, didn't apologize, just leaned over and said, "At least you're not near the bathroom like last time," then floated away in a cloud of lavender perfume. Nathan's jaw tensed. "I swear," he said low, "I've designed earthquake-resistant buildings with more warmth than this family." Before I could respond, laughter echoed from the main tent. Evan stood in the center, raising a glass with his new bride Claire, radiating charm, performing kinship. Claire's eyes swept the room, paused on us, held, then moved on. I wasn't even a disruption, just static. Nathan leaned closer. "You want to leave?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He nodded, but his fingers never left the back of my chair. And in that moment, I realized. He wasn't asking for permission to protect me. He was just waiting for the moment I'd decide to protect myself. We didn't touch the chicken breast. Nathan poked at the risotto like it had wronged him personally. And honestly, it had. 20 minutes later, a murmur passed through the main tent. Jonathan Blake, CEO of Vantage Systems, my company's newest partner, had arrived. Tall, confident, charisma engineered like a keynote speaker. He moved through the room like a man who expected admiration and got it. Until his eyes landed on me, his smile shifted. He crossed the lawn. "You're Valerie Tran," he said, extending a hand. "The one behind Linkwell's architecture." I nodded, standing. "Guilty." Jonathan laughed. "No wonder the code's clean. My dev team swears by your rollout." Nathan stood beside me, arms casually folded, a silent wall. I glanced at Jonathan. I didn't think Evan ever mentioned me. Jonathan's smile faltered. "He didn't, Kyle did." Nathan's head turned slightly. He caught the line before I even processed it. "And what did Kyle say?" Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "That Valerie built the system herself. No VC, no board interference. Frankly, that's rare." I nodded. It's what happens when nobody offers to help and you decide to win anyway. Jonathan opened his mouth to reply, but then my mother appeared. "Oh, Jonathan," she chimed. She looped her arm through his, dismissing me like background noise. "Let me introduce you to Valerie's brother, the real entrepreneur of the family. He's got such a vision for hospitality." I didn't move, but Nathan did, one small shift, one step closer. Jonathan looked between us. "Wait, Valerie's your daughter." She waved it off. "Oh, she's our tech girl. Quiet, smart, keeps to herself." Then, like an afterthought, "You know, Evan and Claire really carried the family legacy." I inhaled, slowly, steady. Behind them, Claire approached, all polished grace and curated warmth. She hugged me lightly, one arm. "Hey, Val, glad you made it." I blinked, thanks. Then she turned to Jonathan, laughed lightly. "I didn't think the software stuff was relevant. No offense, just figured you want to focus on Evan's vision." Nathan shifted again. This time he spoke. "Funny thing about relevance," he said. "It tends to show up when money does." Claire froze, my mother bristled. Jonathan looked at Nathan, then at me, then back again. He didn't smile. Instead, he said, "Would love to hear more about your back-end design later." Then, deliberately, he walked away, but not before giving me a nod of respect. Nathan leaned in. "You okay?" I said nothing. Because I was tired. Of shrinking, of showing up, of playing quiet just to keep the table calm. And as I watched my mother steer Jonathan toward Evan, I knew something had to give. After Jonathan walked away, Nathan and I didn't speak for a full minute. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was loaded. I picked up my cloth napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on my untouched plate. That's how I knew I was done. Nathan noticed. He didn't ask, "Are you okay?" He simply said, "Bathrooms to the left. I'll wait right here." I stood, heels clicking softly against the stone path, as I made my way into the private powder room. It smelled like peonies and overpriced air freshener. The mirror had a gold frame. The sink had a marble base, and my face looked exactly like my mother's for a second. I closed my eyes, then pulled out my phone. One swipe. "Ethan Linkwell, COO." I hit call. He picked up on the second ring. "Boss, what's up?" My voice didn't shake, it didn't rise, it was flat, controlled. "Pull the Vantage deal, effective immediately." Pause, "Are you sure?" "Yes." Another beat. "And Ethan?" "Yeah." "Send it tonight, no explanation." He understood. I hung up, stared at my reflection. Some people throw drinks, others shout or storm out. Me, I move money. And money, when moved correctly, makes more noise than 100 toasts. I reapplied lipstick, smoothed my dress, and walked out of that bathroom like nothing had ever cracked. Nathan was still by the wine barrels, arms crossed, waiting, watching. When he saw my face, he said only one thing. "It's done, isn't it?" I nodded. He let out a breath, low and steady. "Good." He reached for my hand again. And this time, it felt like I was holding a matchstick and a fuse, both lit. The chandeliers inside the reception tent sparkled like they had no idea what was coming. Laughter floated in the air. The string quartet had shifted to jazz. Someone popped a second bottle of Rosé near the head table. Everything shimmered like celebration. I walked in, not fast, not dramatic, just present, like a fact that had been forgotten and was now quietly returning to the room. Nathan didn't follow. He knew this moment was mine to hold and mine to deliver. I crossed the aisle between tables, weaving through a sea of chiffon gowns and old family friends. Some offered polite nods. Some avoided eye contact. No one asked where I'd been, because no one ever noticed when I was gone. At the head table, Claire tilted her chin just so, perfectly posed for a group photo. Evan leaned back, drink in hand, eyes glassy with praise. My mother adjusted a rose centerpiece as if fixing flowers could hide fractures. Jonathan caught sight of me first. His posture shifted, not fear, but curiosity. I stopped 3 steps short of the head table, slipped my phone from my clutch, pressed speaker, dialed. "Link well, this is Ethan." I didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't look at anyone else but Jonathan. "Ethan," I said clearly, calmly, "proceed with the termination." There was a pause, not from him, from the air around us, like the tent itself held its breath. "Copy that," Ethan replied, "effective immediately." Then I added, still facing forward, "The Vantage deal is cancelled, entirely." A sound moved through the room. Not gasps, not whispers, a ripple like the second before a glass shatters. Chairs shifted. A server froze mid-step. Someone dropped a fork. Jonathan stood, slow and tense. "Valerie, maybe we should talk." I met his gaze, steady and unblinking. "Oh, we are talking, right now." Evan stood too. "What the hell is this?" I turned to him, and for the first time in years, I didn't soften my voice. "This," I said, "is your sister remembering her worth and reclaiming her name." Claire stood. "Val, let's just." I cut her off. "It's Valerie." She blinked, and for the first time all day, she looked unsure. From the back of the tent, I heard a cough. A wine glass tipping. Across the room, one of Vantage's other investors stood quietly and began texting. 2 others followed him. The shift had begun, not loudly, not violently, but irrevocably. And I didn't need a toast to know that. I just needed the silence that followed it. I left the tent without looking back. No dramatic exit. No slammed doors, just the sound of heels on stone, and the echo of silence in my wake. Nathan was already outside, by the valet stand, arms folded, a calm storm behind his eyes. He didn't ask how it went. He just opened the car door. "Ready to go." I nodded. We didn't speak for the first few minutes on the road. Seattle's sky was starting to darken, or maybe that was just the filter I saw through now. My phone buzzed. Once, then again, then 10 times in under a minute. The notification screen lit up like fireworks. Missed call, Evan 3. Missed call, Mom 2. Voicemail, Claire. Message from Jonathan. "Can we talk? This can be fixed." Then Ethan, "They just called the office line. Twice. Should I ignore?" Also, Alpine Ventures just sent an offer. Better than Vantage. I smirked. Nathan glanced sideways. "Regrets?" I shook my head. None, only relief. By the time we got back to the city, the fallout had fully bloomed. Inbox 38 unread. Subject, urgent clarification, Vantage deal. Subject, please reconsider, from Jonathan Blake. Subject, what the hell, Val? Evan. Subject, you embarrassed your family, Mom. And then, a different kind of message. From Aunt Lydia. The only one who ever remembered my piano recitals, who sent books instead of gift cards. I stared at her words for a long time. Nathan walked in from the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea. No espresso. No need for adrenaline now. He handed me mine, sat next to me on the couch, didn't say anything, just existed beside me fully, quietly, like always. The last message of the night came from Evan. "You ruined everything." For what? Ego. I didn't reply, but I whispered it aloud just for me. No, not ego, dignity. And for the first time in a very long time, I knew the difference. The text came the next morning. "Lunch, just you and me. No drama, please." Evan. I stared at it for a while, not out of anger, out of curiosity. For years, I would have jumped at that message. I would have hoped. Now, I simply chose a restaurant where I could leave early if I wanted. A small bistro near Capitol Hill. Neutral ground, quiet enough for truth. When I arrived, Evan was already seated, nervous energy disguised behind forced confidence. His tie was askew, the napkin still folded. His fingers tapped a water glass like he was stalling. "Val," he started, "it's Valerie." He swallowed. "Right, Valerie." Silence, then he exhaled. "I don't know what you want me to say." I tilted my head. "Try the truth." He looked up, eyes flickering. "I didn't think you'd actually pull the deal." "That's the problem, Evan. You never think I'll act." He rubbed his temples. "I didn't mean to erase you. It's just everything with Claire, the family, the business. People only have so much attention. So you chose to spend it on being impressive, not being honest." He didn't argue. Then, softer. "You've always been the smart one, the capable one. I guess I assumed you didn't need validation." I smiled cold. "You're right. I don't need validation. I needed basic respect." He looked down, then said the only thing he could say that didn't sound like an excuse. "I'm sorry." I nodded once, not acceptance, just acknowledgement. "I didn't come for an apology. I came so you wouldn't twist this into a misunderstanding. You knew what you did, you know what it cost you." He looked up again, something desperate in his voice. "Is there any way to fix it?" I paused, looked out the window. "That depends on whether you want to fix this or just your reputation." He didn't answer. I stood, left money on the table. "We don't have to hate each other, Evan. We just don't have to pretend this was ever equal." And I walked out quietly but completely. Outside, Nathan waited in the car. Window cracked, coffee waiting, no questions asked. I slipped in beside him. "All good?" he asked. "All done," I replied. And this time I meant it. 1 week later, I hosted a small dinner. Nothing grand, no live music, no floral centerpieces flown in from Holland, just a long oak table. 6 chairs, warm food. And people who saw me, fully. Ethan came, along V-letter 1EDB, Claire Jensen from Alpine Ventures. Aunt Lydia brought homemade ginger cake and a quiet smile. Nathan, of course, set the table, simple, sturdy, intentional, like him. At one point, Claire raised a glass. "To Valerie," she said, "for knowing when to stay quiet and when to move the entire damn table." Laughter not polite, real. And for the first time in years, I didn't flinch at being the center of attention. Because it wasn't performance. It was presence. Later that night, as the guests left and the city lights hummed outside, Nathan and I stayed behind. 2 mugs of tea, 1 dim lamp. No noise, just the kind of silence that holds you gently, not the kind that erases you. I thought about Evan, about Claire, about my mother's perfectly arranged centerpieces. And then I let them go, because some stories aren't meant to be rewritten. They're meant to be left behind like shoes that don't fit anymore, even if they were expensive. I turned to Nathan. "Do you think they ever understood?" He didn't hesitate. "They didn't have to, you did." I smiled, the quiet kind, the one that starts in the chest, not the mouth. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, not loudly, but with certainty. And I knew, in every part of me, that the best seat at the table was the one I built myself.